Hello, my friends. I will try and be as quick as possible. You can slow me down or speed me up as needed. Today, we're going to talk about the human digestive system. Here, you see an image of it with the primary organs of the human respiratory system. These are the primary organs listed. Um, we'll go through that. And there is also the accessory organs. We're going to look at what the difference between the primary and the accessory organs are. So if we start with, there are two awesome videos here on the second slide. You can come back. I will post this on our classroom and watch these. The first one is the science of the hot dog eating contest from ESPN. And then the second one here, we may watch in class at some point together just because it's so cool, is if you have a digestive system problem, you can swallow a tiny pill that has a camera in it, and they can track food, i.e. the pill here, the camera, that takes videos of your digestive tract as it travels through your body and passes out your body. So we'll look at those. So first thing is just the primary purpose of our digestive system is to obtain the nutrients that our bodies need to grow and develop and to do all of their actions. To do that, we ingest the food, we put it in our mouths, and we swallow it, and we take it into our body, ingest, and then we digest it. We break it down in order to use the nutrients that are in it. And that's why we want to eat food that is full of nutrients that our body needs. So again, here's a big image of the human digestive system. There are some words in here we probably will not get into too detail about, so don't stress over it, but it shows you the image starting up here at your mouth and traveling down, getting into your stomach, going into your small intestine, traveling all through, then getting into your large intestine, up and over and down, and then out your rectum and your anus, where any non-needed food leaves our body. So let's take a look. Primary organs: mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, anus. Mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, anus. Try and come up with a way to remember it. Silly little song, whatever it is. Just know that these are the parts that the food is traveling through. These are the primary organs. This is called the alimentary canal. I should have that word up here. I'll type it in the Edpuzzle. Alimentary, A-L-I-M-E-N-T-A-R-Y. The alimentary canal are the organs that the food actually travels through. Accessory organs: your teeth, your tongue, salivary glands, liver, pancreas, and gallbladder. They are helpful and involved in digestion, but the food does not travel through them. So they're helpful, they're accessories, kind of like earrings and a purse and belts and ties and tie clips and cufflinks or whatever else you want to wear as an accessory. These are accessory organs. They help, but the food does not travel through them. So in the mouth, if we look quickly, we have two types of digestion occurring, and these are two types to note. Mechanical digestion is sort of the breaking up and ripping apart and tearing down of food. Our teeth are used for that. Our tongue is used for that as well. And that's just sort of a physical change. If you remember seventh grade, physical change versus a chemical change. So mechanical digestion is a physical change in the food. Chemical digestion is a chemical change in the food. And so inside of our mouth, we've got both taking place. We've got our saliva, which helps break down starches. We've got mucus or mucin, which helps break up proteins. It protects the lining of the digestive system. And the mucus also makes the food slippery, so it can travel through our system a little bit easier. Imagine stuffing your mouth full of like 5 or 6 saltines and trying to eat them and then trying to swallow the saltines. Your mouth gets super dry and it's really, really hard to eat. That's because we need the mucus to coat the food to get it to slide through. We also have buffers in our mouths that neutralize the acid. Some chemicals in our mouths that neutralize the acid, so our teeth don't break down. Coffee drinkers, it's not great. A lot of acid in the coffee. So if you're drinking a lot of coffee, it's hard on your teeth. Things like that. But and then we have antibacterial chemicals in our mouth, which kill the bacteria that enter the mouth with our food. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So our mouth is hugely important and sort of the beginning, obviously, of digestion. It's breaking it up. It's deleting some of the harmful bacteria. It's adding chemicals to get the digestion process beginning, and it's softening and moisturizing the food to travel through our system. There it is again. Chemical mechanical digestion again. And then the food lump is called a bolus. This is formed with saliva and the tongue. That's like the ball of food that you swallow. We call that a bolus. Again, you know this already. We have the epiglottis. We talked about this in the respiratory system. It closes the windpipe or the trachea so that food can travel down the esophagus. And so the esophagus is right here, the pipe right here. It takes about 10 seconds for food to get from your pharynx in the back of your throat to your stomach. So if you can see this here, like this bolus right here, and then this bolus right here, like this is a swallow, this is a swallow, this is a swallow. Like these are when we're swallowing food. And then we do not actively think about, oh, I've got to contract my esophagus so that my food goes down, right? We don't think about the muscle contractions that are needed, kind of like picking something up, or it is a process called peristalsis. The word's right here, peristalsis. That is muscle contractions, and that's what this is supposed to represent here. This is contracted and squeezing. It's almost like squeezing the tube of a toothpaste container or a Go-Gurt container or something. So if you picture this as a Go-Gurt right here, if you squeeze here, you're going to squeeze the bolus down. If you squeeze here, you squeeze it down. And those are muscle contractions that happen without us thinking about it. And that's really how food travels through our entire digestive tract. Okay. Gets into our stomach. It goes from our stomach to our small intestine to our large intestine. It's these constant muscle contractions that are sending and passing food through it, called peristalsis. I can't see below my little slide thing down there. Come on. What that says, but I'm sure it says exactly what I just said it says. Okay. Involuntary is the word I didn't use. Our pharynx, we know, is in the back of the throat. It's just listed here because food does travel through it. We got the nasopharynx up here behind the nose. This is the nose. We got the mouth coming in here. And we got our pharynx. These three parts right here. Don't need to know those three parts. The epiglottis is the flap so that we can send food down to our stomach. Peristalsis, again, another good image of it here. Involuntary wave-like muscle contractions so the food can move through. Our stomach. Food is temporarily stored here from about 2 to 6 hours. Food can be in your stomach anywhere after you consume it. We have juices in our stomach that are secreted when food enters. Those juices help break it down. We have our esophagus leading into the stomach right here. Now, our stomach is just a big bag. It's a big muscle. It is a muscle. It is a round muscle that can expand to 2 liters in size. If we're used to eating more and more, the bigger the stomach will get. If we eat less and less, our stomach will shrink and our muscle will shrink, and you don't get as hungry as quickly. So it has muscles. It contains gastric juices. We're going to see a lot more of this. And then when it leaves the stomach, it's going into the duodenum or the duodenum. It can be pronounced either way, duodenum or duodenum. Here, the pylorus and the esophagus. We also have the pylorus sphincter. This is a controlled opening. It's like almost like a valve, like in our hearts. And up here we have the esophageal sphincter as well that closes off the esophagus from the stomach. We'll see that when we see about heartburn. So food storage, it can stretch to 2 liters. It disinfects food. It kills bacteria. It breaks down proteins. These are the inside lining of it right here. We have glands that produce a mucus right here. And so it covers the lining of your stomach with a mucus, and that protects it from the hydrochloric acid so that our stomach juices don't burn. And you can see right there is that sphincter valve there, and here's the pyloric sphincter. We've got the esophageal sphincter. I'm not sure why it's not labeled. And then the stomach is being broken down and churned around. So there's both mechanical and chemical digestion taking place in the stomach because it churns it and it mixes it. Okay. And then again, there's the mucus that protects the lining of itself. So the stomach kills germs, breaks up food, digests proteins, and stores food. Sphincter and sphincter close off and open it up. Gastric juices, very acidic. We have pepsin. It's an enzyme that breaks down large proteins into amino acids. That's why you have pepsid. It's a chemical our body produces, an enzyme our body produces to break it down. You could take pepsid AC if you have heartburn or upset stomach. That's coming from pepsin. And we call it a bolus when we swallow the food. We call it chyme when it's in our stomachs. So typically, if you throw up, you can say, "Hey, there's my chyme," because you just threw up your chyme. Excuse me a second. Excuse me. If you want to read this is about heartburn. You could pause it and read this, but it's really just our stomach acid. It's not a great picture for stomach acid, but our stomach acid is jumping back up into our esophagus. Um, Food leaves our stomach and goes into our small intestine. Now, this is where most chemical digestion takes place. Um, this is where we are absorbing some small things like sugars and proteins are absorbed into the lining. Initially, fatty acids and glycerol go to the lymphatic system. It's lined with villi. We're going to see these structures. So most of the chemical digestion takes place here, and most of the absorption of the nutrients and of the liquids that we consume is taking place here. Okay, so the small intestine is hugely important. It's for breaking it down, digesting it, and absorbing the nutrients. And so if we see these finger-like projections, it's very similar to the respiratory system in the alveoli, those sacs that are so small but open the surface area. Here we've got these finger-like projections sticking up. I would think of like Finding Nemo when Dory was swimming through the jellyfish tentacles. Is that as the food that's being digested travels through these finger-like projections, the nutrients are absorbed and they go into, you can see, just like the alveoli, it's lined with blood vessels so that they can be absorbed and go right into the circulatory system. All right, so the smallest function is chemical digestion. It's the major organ, like I said, of digestion and absorption. We absorb it through the lining. It's over 6 meters long, looking like 18 to 20 feet long. Okay, and it's got a huge surface area again, just like the alveoli. It's like the size of a tennis court if you unpacked it all and just laid out the surface area. So that's where all of that takes place. Now, you do not need to know these three words here. They're really cool, awesome, some of my favorite English language words, but it's broken into 3 sections. The first section is where most of the digestion is taking place. And we're going to see our accessory organs like our liver, our gallbladder, and our pancreas. They dump a lot of chemicals into our duodenum to help us digest and break down the food. And then we've got the jejunum and the ileum. This is where nutrients are absorbed and water is absorbed. So 90% of the liquids that we consume is absorbed in the intestine. So here's the first section. It's this pink section right here is the first section of the intestine. And you can see it's going from the stomach. The chyme is being broken down and goes into the duodenum right in here, the beginning of the small intestine. We then have the liver. And we're going to see this later on. The liver produces bile, and it's connected directly to the duodenum through this pipe. The gallbladder stores bile, and it's also connected down here. So if we eat high fatty foods, the gallbladder is going to get action, and the bile is going to be increased. And then we have the pancreas produces pancreatic juices, which also go into the duodenum. And all of those chemicals are being added in here to really digest and break the food down into its components, its nutrients. We're trying to break the sugars down. We're trying to break the proteins down. You know, if we think about what proteins are made out of, the amino acids and those building blocks, we're trying to break them down into those building blocks so that our body can then use those building blocks to make the proteins that we want to make. Okay, see how this all comes together? So those proteins that are important when we're thinking about our DNA, those proteins, we consume proteins, break them down to their building blocks, just the basic elements, even if you go down to back to 7th grade with carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, all those primary elements that we need, we break them down here and then we absorb them later on. And then we've got our accessory organs there. So we absorb them in the jejunum and the ileum. Most absorption occurs directly through the wall. Nothing special is needed. We've got those finger-like projections to increase the surface area, the villi, and they just absorb all the nutrients we need. And then here's another detailed view of it. So if this is the narrow pipe of the small intestine, you've got all of these finger-like projections sticking up on the outside of it, and they're covered in blood vessels. Remember, red and blue, we're dropping off, we're picking up. Like these aren't, we're flowing arteries and veins. We got arteries flowing in, and then we've got them flowing back out. Okay, so remember, there are no red and blue bloods, right? So super cool. Finger-like projects. There they are under a microscope. That's what our small intestine looks like traveling through it. Our large intestine now this right here, you'll see is this big piece going over here. It's not nearly as long. We're looking at like 6 feet or so. It goes up, it goes over, and it goes down. So this is our ascending colon, our transverse going across colon, and our descending colon. And then it goes, I'll get the sigmoid colon down here, and then it goes down and out our rectum and our anus, and this is where we excrete the solid waste. So, important piece here, some of the primary importance of the large intestine is that we reabsorb water. So like we said, we put a lot of water in with our mouth and our stomach and our acids and our intestines to break food down and to travel through the system. So we reabsorb the water. We don't do that. Otherwise, if you don't absorb it, you'll have diarrhea and you'll get really dehydrated really quickly, right? Or if you absorb too much water, you get constipated, and that leftover food gets stuck in your intestines, and you can't excrete that waste or that feces. Solid materials pass through it. Undigestible solids, fibers, things that our body does not want or use. We also reabsorb or absorb vitamins K and D. A lot of times those go into the chemical breakdown process, so we use those to pull those back out. Rectums get rid of the solid waste. Also, in our intestines, we have E. coli bacteria produced, and this is our large intestine. And we're just helping break down and get rid of food waste and things that we don't need. Appendix. So if we think about our appendix, we call this an accessory organ or possibly a vestigial organ. This is it right here. This little kind of pigtail looking thing comes off the end of our large intestine, where our large intestine and small intestine meet. Here comes the small intestine in it, into the large intestine, and then our food will travel up. Not 100% sure what this does. A lot of theories. It could be a vestigial organ, which means it's left over from the days when we didn't have fire and we ate raw meat, so it contained bacteria. Another theory is that it could contain good bacteria, so that if we have diarrhea or a stomach bug and our large intestine gets sort of flushed out and we lose a lot of bacteria, our good bacteria, that this is a storage unit for good bacteria to put the good bacteria back in, so that we can sort of rebacterialize our intestine. One other theory, I can't think of what it is right this second. But what happens is if you get an infection in this appendix, that means something starts growing in there. It's infected. You have bacteria growing in there that should not be growing in there. If it gets large enough, it can rupture like a balloon, overinflated balloon, and that bacteria can then leak and spread throughout your body and cause systemic infection inside your body. So what they do is they go in and they cut this out and remove the appendix if they need to, if it's infected. Only once has somebody lost their appendix while we were talking about this in 8th grade. Last section is your colon. Last section of the colon is the rectum, undigested materials, and this is where it's going to leave our body and pass on outside of our body. So accessory organs, pancreas, gallbladder, and liver. We also have our digestive glands up in our secretory glands, producing saliva, adding saliva in it. So these glands help produce saliva and digest food. Our gallbladder stores bile. It's a pouch, and we'll take a look at it. It stores the bile. It breaks down fats, bitter greenish yellow alkaline fluid stored in the gallbladder. Pancreas, it secretes both digestive enzymes and hormones. Sorry, go back here. It breaks down all major nutrient types. So it's dumping in juices in the beginning of that small intestine, the duodenum. So again, here's that picture from earlier, the pancreas, the bile in the liver, the gallbladder, the storage. You're dumping all those juices in the duodenum. That's why they're important in digestion, for breaking down all the things we need to break down. Here's another look at it. Here's the duodenum, the small intestine, pancreas. They're all connected here. All right. Got the hepatic ducts coming down from the liver, the gallbladder, the bile duct, the pancreatic duct. They're just tubes that are carrying the juices. You don't need to know all those names. The juices into the small intestine. Again, the liver's producing the bile right here. It also cleans our blood. A lot of harmful chemicals and drugs and things out of our blood. But it's one of the things it does is produces bile, it dumps it down into the duodenum, or it's stored in the gallbladder for later. Digestive disorders, really quickly, you could have an ulcer, which is an irritation of the lining of your digestive tract somewhere along the lines, usually in your stomach. You could be constipated. You are pulling too much water out of your food in your large intestine. You could have diarrhea where you're not pulling enough water out. Appendicitis, we talked about. Really nasty right here. These are gallstones, hardened cholesterol, calcium inside your gallbladder. This is what cell phones used to look like. At one point, those were actually kind of modern. Those weren't the original cell phones. Not so good. Heartburn is when, if you've got stomach acids churning up in here, you've got your esophageal sphincter, which is the valve that closes this off. If for some reason those juices jump back up out of your protectively lined stomach, those juices end up in your unprotected esophagus. That's what's burning. And that's it. All right, folks, good job getting through this.